Hello, this is the last in a series of 4 about being a strategy expert in the life sciences sector. So if you've not seen any of the other 3 yet or heard them, then I suggest you start there. I began this series by explaining what real strategy expertise is. I used Roger Kneebone's ideas about expertise being about mastering 3 things. So in the second in the series, I covered mastering oneself. In the third, I covered mastering knowledge, and today I'm looking at mastering relationships. As I say, I took these ideas from Roger Kneebone, who's studied this topic of expertise very deeply, and I've applied his ideas to my field of strategy in the pharma and medtech sector. All 3 of these masteries are important, and they're all difficult, which is why genuine strategy expertise is very rare in our industry. But today's topic, mastering relationships, is particularly important in the life sciences because success in pharma and in medtech involves so many different functions, from R&D to market access, from regulatory to medical affairs. And the reality is that cross-functional working makes good working relationships essential to making and implementing strategy in pharma and medtech markets. So that's what I'm going to cover in the next few minutes, but here's the spoiler in a sentence or 2. True strategy experts take this fluffy idea of relationships and they make it concrete. And then they build relationships upwards, downwards and sideways. So let's start with what we mean by relationships. Relationship is one of those English words that has many uses, can mean many things. It can describe anything from a distant LinkedIn relationship to a long, happy marriage. But for a life science strategy expert, a strong relationship has a single concrete meaning. A strong working relationship is one where there is a high level of trust under discretionary conditions. So let's just take a second to think about what that means. You see, one of the characteristics of our industry in particular is that it employs a high proportion of bright, educated people, and it employs them to do very specialised tasks. Now, a corollary of that is that their work, the work of these experts, is highly discretionary. In other words, they have a lot of say in how they do the work and when it's done and so on. Compared to, for example, a production line worker, the work of a medical affairs manager or a market access director can't be strictly controlled by rules and rewards and punishment. We just have to let these people manage themselves. So in the jargon, these people have a high degree of discretion in their work. And that means that working relationships have to work in this high discretion environment. Or to put it more simply, we have to trust our colleagues because we can't order them around. Now, in everyday speech, trust has connotations of unsubstantiated faith. But in the context of working relationships, strategy experts know that trust has a harder, more precise meaning. Trust means the strong belief held equally between 2 people that their values are aligned and that neither of their goals can be achieved without the other. In other words, we trust each other because we need each other to succeed. So, for strategy experts, especially in the life sciences industry, a good relationship isn't simply about being friendly. It's the building of this high trust under discretionary conditions. The strong belief that working together cooperatively, even when you don't have to, is the right thing to do because you share the same goals. Now, this reifying, this making concrete of the concept of relationships is the foundation of managing relationships for strategy experts. And when strategy experts manage those relationships, they do it in those 3 directions, up, down and sideways. Relating upwards, that is, building trust with those above you in the organisation, is essential for strategy experts because, of course, from above flow the resources needed to make and execute strategy. And those resources include tangible resources such as money and people, but also intangible resources such as authority and legitimacy. A weak upward relationship makes strategizing almost impossible. So strategy experts achieve trust with their superiors in 2 ways. First, they make sure that they understand very clearly what those above them want. And secondly, they convince their leaders that in order to achieve their goals, the strategist must be giving the resources to operate. In practice, both those things are difficult to do. Leaders sometimes have hidden goals, such as managing their own reputation in the company. So the strategies expert's task begins with understanding their boss's spoken and unspoken goals. Now, the second task, that is convincing leaders to let the strategy expert operate and giving them the resources to do so, involves making the leader feel confident about the strategist. Strategy experts usually do this by being good communicators and being transparent in how they work. Relating downwards means building trust with those who are lower down in the organisation. These are the people who do the work to make the strategy happen. In our industry especially, those people often have no direct reporting line to the strategy expert because they work in matrix structures. So strategy experts build relationships with the people below them in the organisation by winning their commitment to the strategy. To do this, they have to convince them of three things. First, the outcome of the strategy is important to all of us. Second, what you do in your job is important to the strategy. Third, you are capable of doing a great job. In our industry, strategy experts often use vision statements or mission statements and compelling stories in order to win commitment to strategy. Whichever way you do it, you mustn't neglect these downward relationships. Most strategy experts find that sideways relationships are the most problematic, and there are two reasons for this. First, every strategy is cross-functional, so it involves lots of sideways relationships with multiple different departments. Secondly, those departments often have conflicting goals and often different professional subcultures. If this isn't obvious to you, think for a moment about the success criteria and the mindset of a regulatory affairs team and a sales team. They're very different. Now, they may work for the same company, but the detail of their goals and mindsets are not the same. And when goals and mindsets are different, trust is very hard to build. So experienced strategy experts use two techniques to build these sideways relationships. First, they begin by thinking themselves inside the head of their colleagues from another department. So an expert strategist, for example, has to understand the pressures facing salespeople, the legal limitations on regulatory, and the ethical drivers influencing medical affairs, to pick just three examples. This deep understanding of your peers is the first step into building relationships with them. And the second step is to raise the level of loyalty to the company. Now, this may sound obvious, but it's difficult because human beings like to bond in small groups, and they tend to have loyalty to their team and to their immediate boss rather than to the whole company. Sometimes they have loyalty to their profession rather than the company. But again, appealing to a patient-centric mission is often useful here. Both these steps, getting inside the head of your peers and building loyalty to the company's mission, are important to building sideways relationships in a life science company. And in a cross-functional team, you really can't afford to neglect those sideways relationships. So at the beginning of this series, I gave a very tight scientific definition of a genuine strategy expert. A strategy expert is someone whose competence in allocating substantial resources over the long term enables the achievement of mission-critical goals, even in circumstances where a good, competent strategist would fail. Now, this is a very high bar. By this definition, most people who work in strategy are not strategy experts. They're just competent strategists. In my decades of research into strategy, I found that no one is born a strategy expert. Becoming a strategy expert is like learning any advanced level skill. It requires intense effort over a long time. Now, in this series, I've organised that effort into three masteries. Mastery 1, which is mastering oneself, is largely an internal process. It involves controlling your instinctive fast thinking to enable more reflective slow thinking. You can find more about this in the second part of the series. Mastery 2, mastering knowledge, involves differentiating between insight, knowledge, information, and data. It also involves a set of 4 interrelated skills, which I cover in the third part of this series. And then Mastery 3, mastering relationships, which I've covered today, is about creating trust under conditions of high discretion. And that trust must be upwards, downwards, and sideways. But the final lesson of this series is that these 3 masteries rely on each other. Mastering oneself, mastering knowledge, and mastering relationships are all necessary, but none of them are enough on their own. You need to do all 3 at once. I hope you found the series interesting, relevant to you, and useful. If you'd like a set of all 4 PDFs that cover this body of work, then please get in touch. And if you're a strategist in a pharma or a medtech company and you'd like to chat about this over a cup of coffee, then please get in touch. I'll be glad to chat. Thank you for listening.